A new chapter in competitive TF2 history has pretty much been closed now, I would say, with a recent vote in North America on whitelist policy and weapon bans, uncovering a lock-and-load ban, which marks North America as the last of the major regions to ban the lock-and-load. It had already been banned in Europe for a couple of years now, OzFortress probably around a year if I had to guess, and North America now is playing without it. And I don't expect it to get unbanned anytime soon, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So I want to talk about, kind of a retrospective on the weapon, its competitive play, things like that. This will be primarily from a North American perspective, just because I'm from North America. And also, this is not in my memory for anything prior to like 2015 or so. So the people who were actually, well, we'll get to that. Okay, so first things first, Loch-n-Load. What is it? Well, if any of you are boomers like I am, and you started playing this game before the gunmetal update, or maybe even before that, I don't know when the Loch-n-Load specifically was changed, but it used to be a weapon that had 2 grenades that did, I think, 25% more damage. And this is back in the day of random damage spread, meaning that when you hit the base damage is 125, and that can be plus or minus like 15% roughly, I think. And that meant that with that damage spread, whether or not you could just straight up one-shot a light class, such as a scout, your engineer, sniper, the majority of the classes, would literally just be a 50-50 coin flip as to what side of the damage spread you would get. And that iteration of the Loch-n-Load was, from my memory, one of, if not the most complained about weapons in casual play, and was considered like a quintessential crutch weapon. And since has undergone changes. Now, I will mention, in a competitive context, the unlock was banned during this time, as far as I'm aware. I'm pretty confident in that, because when it got changed to have 3 grenades, but like a 20% damage bonus rather than 25, it was certainly banned. So I imagine. Similar case for when it did more damage, had 1 fewer grenade. Although, feel free to fact check me on that. But yeah, for this duration, when it was, not one-shotting classes, but still more damage, and those 3 grenades, it was banned in competitive play, which makes sense. I mean, it's a pipe that just does more damage. It's really good. And of course, it retained the faster firing speed, which will be a very important topic of discussion, because it really influences the weapon a lot. Because if you look at the weapon now, you can see, oh, I have a kill streak. There we go. You can see that the projectile speed and the damage versus buildings is like fine. It's like actually kind of useful in 6s, but the projectile speed's really the only like upside, with quite a few hefty downsides. So it has to be like really, really impactful for it to actually, make the weapon unbalanced. So anyway, yes, in competitive play, the Loch-n-Load was banned during this time, but then comes the gunmetal update, I believe, which changed it to only have a damage bonus on buildings. So compared to other grenade launchers, so let's say compared to the Iron Bomber, which the splash radius 15% on you, and that's 25, okay. So compared to the Iron Bomber, you actually have a smaller splash radius on the pipe. You don't have any rollers whatsoever, and rollers are absolutely broken. That is the topic of its own video that I have. Actually, I've talked about rollers being broken on a couple occasions. But the yeah, lack of rollers is huge. Having one fewer pipe compared to the Iron Bomber, absolutely huge. These are really, really big downsides. And the only real upside is that the pipe shoots or travels faster, right? So, shortly after this update, the Loch-n-Load was unbanned. And that is the state that the weapon is in today. So, what changed? What happened to suddenly make people want to ban this thing again? Well, it got popular pretty much. So, yeah, people just started using it more and kind of realized that the more problematic elements of the weapon haven't been really fundamentally changed, and that being just the faster projectile speed. Because there are a few, I guess, results from that one change. One of them being pipes are easier to hit, right? Less travel time means less time for your opponents to react, which means it's easier to hit pipes at any range, including those mid to close ranges when pipes can be really, really useful defensively to avoid, people just killing you as a demo, who's usually a class that's quite vulnerable close range. So it's just categorically easier to connect direct hit pipes with it. This is ignoring the whole no rollers thing, because there is a lot of consistent damage to be found in rollers, especially in like choke points and things like that. But nevertheless, if we're talking objectively connecting directs for 100 damage, Loch-n-Load is just easier to hit pipes with because of this faster projectile speed. But another consequence of that is that the Loch has a longer effective range by quite a big margin. So not only, I know there's some, source physics spaghetti going on with like the tumble of grenades and like air resistance and stuff like that, which the Loch-n-Load like doesn't tumble, so it might go like a little further because of that. But primarily the fact that it just shoots a faster projectile means that projectile goes further. And that is a big deal because, again, and I'll have plugged the roller video in the cards for the prior point, but one of my recent videos talks explicitly about pipes just being unbalanced, and the Loch-n-Load is quite indicative of that, and I'll post the card for that here. But yeah, pipes in general, no damage fall off, doing 100 damage if they connect directly to an opponent, no matter what, is a lot, right? Needless to say. And no other weapons can really replicate that damage at range, with the exception of like Sniper, which is very clearly like a class designed around that principle. I would say poorly so, but nevertheless. So yeah, these long-range pipes can be a big deal, and it tends to lead to some goofy moments where a med just catches 2 pipes and dies across the map, when with basically any other source of damage besides, again, a sniper, which in those cases, like, you spot the sniper and it's very clear, like, if they peek the sight line, then they're, in danger of just instantly dying, which isn't really the case against the Loch. Like, there's still just like the spam element of it. But basically, you're going to be eating a ton of damage and potentially dying. And not even just as a med, but really any class. Like, a pipe is so much damage. You're going to be eating this damage at ranges in which any other source of damage in the game is not going to be doing that much, right? And that can be quite disruptive of an experience. And I suppose now is a good enough time to bring up that I have obviously talked about the Loch-n-Load before, and that's another thing. I'll link to the cards here if you're interested in what that discussion kind of sounded like in North America probably a couple years ago, I would say. Because, yeah, people, there has been multiple sort of waves of discussion about the Loch and considering banning it and things like that in North America. So now it has finally happened. I should I guess now talk about how we actually got to this point where it became popular. And again, Europe had been playing around with it and ended up banning it. I forget the name of the Prem demo who was running it full time, but yeah, they had banned it prior. In North America, though, I am much more familiar with the kind of story of how it became more popular, and I actually played a role in it, I think. So I was by no means the first person to experiment with the lock, and in fact, the only reason I really tried it was on insistence from a friend of mine, Math, actually, who had been running it basically whenever he played demo, and was a very good. He's actually in this demo as the soldier, not the soldier who just fed to the medic, but the one who lived. Okay, so oh, and the NS in chat means that he probably got air shot. Oh no. Right, so he's a very good abuser of it, I will say. Much better than I am, but also actually someone on the other team in this demo. That's coincidence. I didn't do that on purpose. But Hedgehog Hero, the other demo, was playing around with the Loch-n-Load quite a lot as well. And there were some frag videos from this other team called, I'm playing against the Goblin Zone, so there's some Goblin Zone frag. They're more like movies, but whatever. There's a lot of funny and cool Loch-n-Load clips there. And those were my main inspirations for trying out the weapon. And this is probably around 2021, I want to say. That sounds about right. It might be more like 2022 or so. But point being, I was running this thing full time, and really the only person actively playing who was doing that, because Math wasn't playing demo and Hedge was not playing the game at the moment. So yeah, I was kind of the only guy to be playing with this thing in North America. There are a couple exceptions there. So what are their aliases? Damn. One such example, not exactly North American, because they're like, I guess European, but they play in North America a lot. But Zesty McLime, I know, is definitely a lock enthusiast. Lucrative was not playing at this point, but historically had used the weapon, and that's actually where Math got the idea from, or the inspiration. So there's some through line here, but by and large, it's kind of disconnected. Shoot, I can't be forgetting this person's name, because they like use a bunch of different aliases. Okay, whatever. I know who you are, and just know that I'm not forgetting you here. It'll come to me. Anyway, yeah, so for the time that I was like playing around in Maine, and I think that the season I won Maine was the first season I like full-time used the Loch-n-Load. And prior seasons I just experimented with it on Koth and things like that, because again, like that long range spam just feels quite nice. But anyway, the through line there. Pretty soon it starts getting picked up and played with by other people. Either people who played against me, or in some cases people who demo reviewed me in higher divisions, or in some cases people in lower divisions than me who, I don't know if I was making videos at this time, but I guess there was some connection there. So it started getting a bit more popular. Maybe I have main character syndrome, but I do think I played some role in the popularization of the Loch-n-Load in North America. But anyway, in the past couple years, the usage of it has really exploded. We have seen prior invite-winning demos like Artist kind of reinvent themselves under the Loch-n-Load, and it really it can change how you play. And here's where I'm going to start getting into sort of how it looks like for the Loch-n-Load to be in the game. Okay, yeah, Hedge is using the lock here, so this is actually quite an old demo from like mid 2024. This was a playoffs game. By this point, Loch had been, it was pretty popular. I don't know if it was like a mainstay in Invite yet, but still quite a popular choice for sure. But anyway, the what was my thought? Yeah. What does the lock actually look like in played TF2, right? Because you can kind of theory craft about like what the stats are, and oh yeah, like long range is nice and all that, but like sure, other weapons don't have that same kind of range, but what does that actually mean? How does that actually translate to the game being played? So the first thing, and this is kind of getting into arguments people had against the lock. So first things first, the lock inarguably allows a demo to be more effective from range than they would have been otherwise. You can make arguments about to what extent this is fair, or to what extent there's the counterplay is reasonable, because there's certainly reasonable elements of counterplay as far as like dodging is concerned. And in fact, this was one of the big holdovers I had in the lock discussion. And we'll actually get to my opinions on it and what I voted for at the end here. So stay tuned. Yeah, this was a big motivation for me in the discussion, because I personally didn't really have many issues playing against it. I used to be like good at this game, but I also used to be good at dodging spam, I think, in particular compared to other players. So I really didn't have trouble catching random lock pipes. That didn't really affect me much. But not necessarily the case for other players. And there's obviously a lot of discussion about what is considered fair as far as like what is killing you, right? To what extent should you be expected to dodge these projectiles? Man, this sniper really lost these peaks. Oh God. Right. And that's always going to be a discussion. It's like how fair is this? But I think it is inarguable that it extends Demo's range. But also, considering Demo is such a valuable class in sixes, it allows you to play way safer. Because with very few exceptions, range is damage, right? The further away you are, the safer you are from threats, with, again, the exception of your sniper, and I guess pipes. But even then, like pipes, you're safer from further away because you can like react to them and dodge them and whatnot. So really the only thing in TF2 that you are just as unsafe against at range is a sniper. So as a demo, being safe is really important. And if you can still be effective while being really baity and playing back and just spamming lock pipes or just charging sticks, leaving a little carpet, spamming some pipes, stuff like that, like you can play it in a way that is pretty reasonably effective. And you're not putting yourself in any danger for that. On top of the fact that, again, if you went and watched the video about why pipes in general are broken, then first of all, thank you. But second of all, you'd understand that a player eating a random 100 damage a player eating a random 100 damage in general during a team fight, or even during like a sack or something like that, is just fight defining at a high enough level. When players are good enough to capitalize on those advantages, then hitting a pipe on a medic or a scout, or really anyone, is something that a team that is otherwise on relatively even footing with the other team can just win the fight off of. So it's huge. And man, what was the point that segued into that? I'm a little scatterbrained at the moment. But yeah, point being, oh, right. So if you can still apply that level of just huge fight-defining damage while staying safe, then it's really, really effective. Or rather, it's not so much that it's like more effective than if you were getting aggressive, but it is the ratio of effectiveness to risk being taken is definitely better. It's definitely more favored because there's very few risks being taken in like playing back and spamming pipes. And if those pipes have longer ranges and you can effectively, be still hitting players because of that, then yeah, it's definitely favorable position. That being said, shoot, I had something for a moment there. Damn. We were talking about being baity as a demo, spamming pipes. I think I lost it. Nevertheless, so yeah, this was something we were seeing happening more. Oh, yeah, another thing. I got it. So something that I didn't really do much at all, but you started to see better players develop is kind of like lineups. Now I've seen like videos of people actually trying to set up like, what's the word I'm looking for? Because you know how a pipe will just detonate after a certain point. The Loch-n-Load still does detonate as long as it doesn't hit something. So if you shoot it like really high, it'll still pop at a certain point. So I was seeing some lineups for like air det locks, which I thought was like kind of dumb, like funny, but not something I would ever do in game. But you start to figure out kind of spam angles and places to connect pipes that people are likely to be standing in, because space is a really important thing in TF2. And especially when like you kind of know where someone's at or know where someone needs to get at to, play a decent enough position to actually take a reasonable fight, well, then you can be spamming pipes there. And it's really not that tough to connect a lock in a choke point, even though, again, the lack of rollers definitely hurts in those choke points. But still, you can do this very safely, especially in those disad situations when the other team has an Uber and your team does not. You don't want to be so forward that they can just pop their Uber and kill all of you. You have to play a little far back. But when you're playing far back, the other team will often want to take the space and take the point without using Uber. This is like one of the most fundamental ebbs and flows of TF2, is that kind of disad positioning. So the lock being able to still connect really important pipes on teams that are trying to push with advantage while you're still playing in a very safe disad position definitely helps out a lot. And it means that you can have your traps up and still have really nice pipe spam, all without being overcommitted as far as your positioning is concerned, which is quite nice. So again, common theme here, demos get to play safer, they get to play more baity, while still being somewhat effective or comparatively effective, right? And I really am careful here not to say that like the lock makes you more effective, because I don't think that's the case. And I don't really think that it is a straight upgrade in every situation, which is, I guess that's like a very harsh way to put it. I would consider it like not a straight upgrade in even just most situations. And I don't think that it needs to be, right? I don't think that the center of discussion should be about whether it's a straight upgrade or not. I think it should be about what it actually does to the gameplay and whether the game is better off or worse off without it, right? So anyway, that was all to say what was it? You're talking about... Right. I'm being careful not to say that it's making you more effective, because a lot of the time I don't think that's actually the case. And this is more my opinion speaking, because for a lot of people, the main problem they have with the lock is, let's say it's a scout player and they die at mid-range, and in their mind, they would have been able to dodge an iron bomber pipe, but the Loch-n-Load was faster and they weren't able to, and they died. And for them, they're like, okay, that gun is better, right? Because it got a kill there that it wouldn't have otherwise gotten. And there's things it can do that Iron Bomber can't, for sure, or Stock can't. But I was never too convinced by those kinds of arguments. This is, I guess, as good a time as any to mention that there has and probably will continue to be a lot of cope in the discussion, because there's certainly going to be a large number of biases on both sides of the discussion. But one of the big biases, I think, against the lock is going to be the fact that when people die to it, they notice, right? And when they don't, right? It's just that confirmation bias. So when you die to a lock pipe, you're thinking, oh, wow, this weapon is like too good, versus when they just die to Iron Bomber, it's like, oh, I just caught a pipe. I shouldn't do that. So there's certainly that element to it, and I have seen some of the loudest detractors of the weapon just catch, to be honest. Like, people will just be, asleep at the wheel, catch two from across the map that were so easy to avoid, like there's not much else going on, and then start complaining in the call about Loch-n-Load being too good, let's get rid of it. And yeah, it's always hard to kind of factor, well, it's hard to approach the discussion with stuff like that at play, because again, it is just, it is, for a lot of people, just a get good sort of thing. And funnily enough, even today, I still kind of think that a lot, like the majority of people that have issues with the Loch-n-Load, I do still think it's a get good issue for them. But, well, we'll get to what I voted on and what my opinions are further to the end. So, yeah, one of the primary problems people have are like these, deaths they're having because of the faster projectile. They're perceiving it to be a better weapon. But I should say that another big one is just those cross-map pipes, because that's not an interaction that you really have otherwise. And it's, again, very, very disruptive to just eat 100 damage from across the map. And a lot of the time it can feel random. And this is a point that I have made in other Loch-n-Load videos in the past, but yes, you can dodge pipes. Yes, you can be paying attention to the incoming spam, but there are going to be times when a demo just pre-fired a pipe at the right time and you walk around a corner and it hits you. That's going to happen. I talked earlier about how I pride myself on dodging spam, particularly like demo spam, paying attention to those pipes and avoiding them. That doesn't mean I'd never get piped. And man, it's only when I'm recording stuff that I am saying out loud, like getting piped all the time, and it sounds weird, but whatever. So yeah, you're gonna get hit by pipes at some point. It just happens over the course of a game. As a demo, when you're spamming, some of your spam is going to connect. And people who use the lock, regardless of their opinions on if it's good or bad or fun or not fun or should be banned or should be allowed, no matter what their opinion, if you use it, you will at some point be hitting a pipe that's just kind of random. A somewhat random cross-map pipe that is not consistently replicable, but nonetheless, it's a pipe that you hit. And that, I think, feels really bad for people. And again, you can, consider some confirmation bias to this equation, of like, oh, that's bullshit, whatever. But it's certainly not an interaction you have with basically anything else. Like, you peek a choke point as a med and instantly die to a sniper, that is your fault for peeking first. If you if you peek a choke as a med, and a demo just happened to shoot the pipe and your med catches and now they got piped and the soldier finds the force, there really isn't much you can do about that, to be honest. Like, you can, okay, there's technically things you can literally do, as in, wait out what you expect to be the 3 pipes and then start walking forward when you expect the demo to not have ammo or be on a reload interval or stuff like that. Of course, there's always going to be elements of like the counterplay, but just as easily that demo could decide to hold off on the pipe for a second and then shoot it, right? It's just random. Compared to against the sniper, again, it's like a very clear misplay of having your med peak without being able to properly clear it, identifying that that's a threat, stuff like that. It's so much more consistent to play around, I would say, and much less random. So it feels fairer. Right. What else as far as lock sort of arguments are concerned? Because obviously the big ones are pipes just being a bit easier to hit and pipes being so strong, making that, a potential issue. And the long range kind of random pipes. Oh, also just the long range in general, enabling demo to play more baity, and more pipe oriented. I think those are kind of the main arguments against the lock. Arguments in favor of it, in favor of its inclusion. None of them really say that the Loch-n-Load is healthy or fun gameplay wise. It's mostly just that it's not bad, which I think is fine. Like, that's a fine argument to have a weapon stay unbanned, is if it's just fine, like it's not really hurting things. I think that's reasonable, but it's not really like a very proactive argument. And keep in mind, this is an argument that I have made multiple times, I would say. Although I've generally trended more towards ambivalence as far as the lock is concerned. Although I do hate the copers. I hate the cope, I guess. So anyway, the main arguments in favor of it, or in favor of including it, is that it's a reasonable amount of counterplay, right? You can dodge it pretty reasonably. It is not a straight upgrade. That I think is true. And people might disagree with me, but I would definitely stick to that. There are so many times when playing Iron Bomber, I'm just like so happy to be on that unlock compared to lock. But anyway, yeah, if it's not a straight upgrade, and there's still reason to like use other unlocks or whatever, even if it is strong, it's not so much stronger that it's a problem. The counterplay is reasonable, things like that. Again, kind of matters of opinion here, as these discussions will tend to be. But yeah, that's the main thing. Now, I haven't seen any actual competitive players make the case of leave the unlock unbanned because leaving weapons unbanned is better than banning them. I think that's more of a casual perception. Well, like, there was those discussions kind of in old school days. I guess it still kind of exists to some extent, but yeah, yeah, leaving something banned or unbanned just for the purposes of it, in and of itself, seems kind of silly to me, because why not make your argument about what the weapon actually does to the game, right? Rather than anything else. Nevertheless, those are the main arguments in favor or against banning the Loch-n-Load. Now it's time to get into my opinions and what I voted on. So I have expressed ambivalence in recent times towards the Loch-n-Load. I've said I don't really care if it gets banned or not. Again, I definitely have used it. I mean, the seasons that I've done very well on, well, just tend to be the seasons that I played more recently. But I was also using it, right? After my advanced season, I started testing out Iron Bomber more often. I was not just a full-time lock player, but again, I definitely benefited from the weapon, without a doubt. However, I voted to ban it this time around. And there's a few reasons for that. So, for starters, I actually am ambivalent. Like, I would not have cared very much if it was not banned. However, ambivalence is not really a position you can vote on a yes or no, so I kind of had to choose one. And my reasons in the moment of clicking to vote ban were kind of selfish, I'll say, in that I think I benefit from the lock less than other players. Like, you see in the really lock-heavy meta of players who have gotten really good at abusing that weapon specifically and play to abuse that weapon specifically, the damage spread between stickies and lock pipes is going to be like close to 50-50. In some case, lock damage actually beats out sticky damage, which is crazy. Because like traditionally, your stickies are going to be like 60% of your damage minimum, and sometimes even getting higher than that. And I was a player who, even while abusing, and I don't even know if I can say that in my case, even while using the lock, I was still getting, 70% sticky damage, sometimes even more. So I was definitely not abusing it to the same extent as other players. So proportionally speaking, I actually kind of stood to benefit from a lock ban, because I wouldn't really get hurt as much as other demos who are more reliant on it are. So there's that element. But also I kind of just wanted to see things shaken up. because I think it would be kind of interesting. But that being said, I do kind of think that the meta game might be better off without it, just in the sense that those random long-range pipe interactions, like, they don't need to exist, right? I think that they're kind of a detriment to the game. Not a huge one, but one nonetheless, because it's, again, like kind of elements of randomness. It sucks when a fight feels more out of your control. Obviously, if your med has better movement, they're going to catch fewer of those log pipes compared to a med who has worse movement and is worse at avoiding spam, sure. But nonetheless, even like the best medic is going to catch a random pipe, and if you really don't want, it could be in it could be in a situation where you really don't want that to happen. And it's really impactful, and it just straight up sucks, right? I also prefer... I actually have more fun using the Iron Bomber, although that's pretty separate from whether the lock is banned or unbanned, because I could just use it, and I was. But, yeah, I think that it is better when demos kind of have to commit more of their safety to getting better damage. And I think that's a more interesting way to play the game. But honestly, like, the big thing really is just those random pipes, which just do not feel good at all. They feel great to hit, very funny. Just to pipe the med in a choke point that you don't even see, you're shooting over something. It's hilarious. But yeah, I don't think it really needs to exist in the game. And that's an argument that not everyone shares. A lot of people have different reasons, as I've gone over. Like, for some people, they really do just think it's a straight upgrade. They really think that it's so much easier to hit pipes, and that there's no reason not to be using it. I kind of disagree in moments like that. Other people think that the Loch-n-Load is problematic because of the close range, actually, and being able to hit pipes easier in close range. Different people have different reasons for liking or disliking the weapon. But for me, I just don't like I don't like the kind of interactions that it encourages. Compared to the Iron Bomber, which in and of itself, again, pipes in general are broken. But yeah, I think that I don't expect that the lock will be unbanned. Again, as I mentioned, the earlier whitelist history of it kind of went in line with balance changes around the weapon, which I don't think we're ever going to see again. So yeah, I think that the lock might be gone for good now. And again, kind of a change in the competitive scene. I could end on a point about people talking about stale metagame, but I won't, because that would be stupid. But anyway, yeah, I think that's all as far as the lock is concerned. I don't expect to see more developments in this front, because it seems that with the recent wave of North American players deciding, hey, I think I'd prefer to play without this, I don't see it being reintroduced anytime soon. Maybe in the distant future, who knows? But if I could compare it to something like, say, the Cow Mangler, which I would say is probably more broken, people have been kind of half talking about unbanning it for years and years and years, but that has never actually happened. And at this point, like, there are very few people still playing the game that played when Cow Mangler was allowed. So, if anything, it's more likely to get unbanned, but it still hasn't happened yet. So we'll see. But yeah, new chapter in competitive TF2. The Loch-n-Load is kind of officially out of here, which it's been interesting. Cool to see the kind of developments there. It's been fun to be a part of it, using the weapon. Yeah, I definitely have some funny clips. But anyway, that's all from me on the topic. Hope you guys enjoyed. Like the video if you did. If you made it this far, you probably did. And subscribe to my channel if you have not. But anyway, I'll see you guys next time.